I'm Chloe, and in today's lesson, we will learn how to summarize a story, then choose how we might use that story in a conversation with a foreign friend. Most importantly, I will give you some time to compose your own answers, which we will use in a conversation between ourselves. And we will consider how everything that you learned today could be used as part of oral examinations. Our lesson today will concentrate on the story of Rong and other tales of propriety. Firstly, let's quickly try to summarize the story of Rong takes the smallest pear and Zengzi avoids the mat, both of which stories you will find in your Stories of China book. In both stories, there are characters who many foreign people will not have heard about. We need to explain who the main three people are: Rong, Zengzi, and Confucius. I would like you to pause the video for a moment and write a short paragraph explaining who these three men were and a little about their place in history. Perhaps start with Confucius, as he is their leader. Okay, thank you for that. I'll give you an example of how I would explain these three men to a friend. Confucius was a Chinese philosopher and politician. He was from the spring and autumn period in Chinese history, which was around 500 BC. He was and still is one of the most significant figures of Chinese culture because he influenced and emphasized both personal and governmental principles: correctness of social affairs, integrity, compassion, and honesty. These are the values which Chinese society is built around today. Zengzi was a disciple who was taught by Confucius, and Rong was a descendant born many years after Confucius's death. Both men were incredibly successful in the spreading and teachings and beliefs of Confucianism throughout China. Okay, now we have an explanation of the three main characters of our story. We need to consider how to give an overview of the stories. Perhaps a foreign friend might ask you, what kind of lessons did they teach? Or, what can you learn from men that were born so long ago? How could we answer this question by using the two stories? Let's first focus on summarizing the story of Rong takes the smallest pear. I'll give you 5 minutes to summarize the story briefly, in approximately 7 to 10 sentences. Play the video again when you are ready. Okay, so you have your own summary. I will read for you my example. Feel free to take some notes. When Rong was just 4 years old, he was sitting down to eat with his 5 older brothers when they were all offered a pear. Rong chose to take the smallest pear, which both surprised and confused his brothers, who all wanted the largest. They asked him why he took the smallest one, and Rong replied it was because he was the youngest, so he should have the smallest. The 4-year-old showed a special understanding and respect for his elder relatives. He was modest and polite. Was your summary similar to mine? I bet it was. But now how about the second story of Zengzi? How might you summarize this one? Again, I'll give you a few moments to compile in your own words the story of Zengzi avoids the mat. Please pause the video until you have finished. Right, I'm sure you've done a great job, but I will read out my account of the story. Let's see if we have similar ideas, shall we? Zengzi was a disciple of Confucius, and one day during a lesson, Confucius asked Zengzi if he knew how past emperors were able to govern entire empires without conflict and whilst keeping mutual respect and harmony. Zengzi was a very intelligent man, but he jumped up from the mat and proclaimed that he was too unwise to ever be able to understand such a thing. He begged Confucius to enlighten him. Zengzi, although a wise and special man, was incredibly respectful of his teacher. He showed humility and was incredibly humble towards his educator, unassuming of his own intellect and thankful for what he could be taught. So there we have two summaries. I'm sure that yours are similar. But how could we ever make these relevant or useful in a conversation? What is the connecting factor between the two? Why are they important stories, and how would you explain these to a foreign friend? I would like to consider an answer to the following questions. Please take a few minutes to think about the answers. You can write them down if you like, as you might use them later on. Feel free to play the video again when you are ready. Welcome back. So I have my own answers to these questions. They might be slightly different from yours, as I am not Chinese and I have grown up living in a very different culture, but I would like to share my views. Firstly, I believe that the stories are both about propriety. That is, that both the 4-year-old boy and the grown man were able to show decency, respect and modesty towards people who they viewed as more important or more experienced than themselves. They were understanding and yielding to other people. I feel that these values are extremely apparent in Chinese society. For example, students will often be more reluctant to question a teacher or parent. Children will respect their grandparents and learn from their elder relatives words of wisdom. When in business, the boss will usually final say in decisions, and others will tend to respect that decision because they trust in the experience and wisdom of their boss. It is important to also understand that this idea of propriety can work both ways, and many teachings of Confucius focus on the ability to learn from a child or a person with less experience. But in these stories, the main lesson that we learn is about the importance of humility, propriety, and respect in Chinese society. I understand that your answer might be slightly shorter, and that's fine. So now we have a summary of the two stories and we can talk about the importance of these tales. We can start to consider why they might come up or be useful in conversations with foreign friends. Perhaps you might be talking to a friend about things you have learnt in school in China. Or maybe you might be comparing the important qualities in your cultures. Your friend might say, at school in England, we learned about many important people from history, such as kings and queens who ruled the country, or Socrates, who was also a philosopher. How could you continue the conversation from this? How could you link what you have learned about Rong and Zengzi to your friend's statement? I'll give you a few minutes to think about this. Please pause the video. In my opinion, I would link my friend's statement to the shared fact that you both learned about significant historical figures, then go on to explain about Confucius. Or I might contrast my experience and tell them that although English kings and queens ruled and led their countries like a Chinese emperor would, Confucius taught and educated instead. Do you agree? Your friend might say, as a child, we were taught that we should be proud of our achievements as long as we tried our hardest. We were taught that if you want something, you have to take it before the opportunity passes. Like, when I am at work, I have to compete with others to get the best job. I have to assume and believe that I am the best, because if I am not, and if I don't, another person could beat me to the top position. In this instance, you could compare and contrast the lessons that we learn from Rong and Zengzi, and then go on to explain the stories. So now comes the final part of a lesson. We are going to have a virtual conversation. And all of this can also help you with your oral English exams. Now I will show you some types of questions that I might ask you throughout today's conversation. I might not say them in exactly the same way, but you can have some time now to think about your answers to the following. I would like you to take some time now to plan answers for these questions. You don't have to write them out, but do take notes if you want. Then, when you are ready, you can play the video and I will come back as your foreign friend. I will ask you questions and tell you things about me, and you can play and pause the video whenever you feel you want to. You could even get a friend or parent to record this conversation we have, so you can look back over it later on. Okay, here are the questions again for you. I'll see you soon. Hi, it's great to see you again. So I've been thinking about when I was in school. Wow, it was like a roller coaster ride, right? I really loved learning languages and anything art related. How about you? How do you feel about school? What subjects did you like the most? Yes, fantastic. I think that Chinese and English schools are so different though. I remember once having to work with a group of people that were so lazy and unmotivated, but our final score was based on how well we worked together as a team. I really learned a useful lesson there about having patience for others and how to be a good team leader. It was such a valuable experience for me, and it's helped me so much in life today. How about you? Can you think of a particularly beneficial lesson or skill that you learned at school? Oh, it sounds like that will be really useful in the future. Maybe when you study at university or a workplace. It's amazing what we can learn from our past, right? In England, we were always taught about different important monarchs from history. You know, kings and queens who ruled the country. But not all of them were very kind to their subjects. If anything, we learned how not to model our behaviour on the past kings and queens. Did you like history as a subject? Can you think about anyone from history that has been a great influence for Chinese culture? Oh wow, these people sound like really interesting people and very knowledgeable. What else do you know about them? What are your favourite stories about them? It sounds like the lessons they taught are really relevant even in today's society, right? What do you think English people could learn from these people that you've talked about? Why is it important that people are aware of the teachings of these men? That's so interesting. Well, thank you so much for talking today to me. I feel that we could learn a lot from each other. But for now, I will say goodbye, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.